Hi everyone, it's Mrs. Wine. Welcome back to art class. Today we are going to be learning how to create stencil prints, and you're going to have the opportunity to practice with some printing. So before we start, let's make sure we've gathered all the materials. You will need to have a newspaper to keep your work surface clean. You will need the paper on which you're going to print. You will need the stencil that you've cut out of tagboard. You will need a thick bristled brush and paint in the color that you are going to use to print. Now, as you can see here, I have a print that I've already finished. But before we start, I want to talk about the characteristics of a good print so you will know what to do. The first thing you need to work toward is having clean and neat edges. One thing you can do to get those edges clean and neat is make sure you only start with a small amount of paint on your brush. This will help prevent the paint from going under your stencil. The other thing you need to do when you're printing is make sure you really hold the edges of that stencil down in place. The other big characteristic of the stencil print that you want to work toward today is making sure that that paint is darker near the edge of your stencil. And as that paint moves away into the negative space, the paint is going to get lighter and lighter and lighter, making it look like it just fades away. So let's try. I'm going to hold my stencil firmly in place as much as I can. And I'm going to make sure when I get my paint, I get just a small amount of paint on the tip of my brush. I'm not stirring around and getting a lot of paint. I just need a little bit of paint. So I'm going to get a little bit of paint on the end, and then I'm going to hold my stencil down. Now today I want to make two prints, so I really want to make sure that I start on one side of my paper. It doesn't matter whether you start on the left or the right. Whichever way you want to start is up to you. Then I'm going to start right here, and I'm going to really hold the edges of this stencil down, and I'm just going to start to dot a little bit of paint around the edge. It's okay if I leave a few spaces blank, but I want to make sure I have enough paint to go all the way around the edge. Then I want to make sure I don't leave any empty spaces. So notice I'm not really painting, I'm dabbing or stamping the brush. And I have to work pretty quickly because, as you can see, that paint's already starting to dry. And then once I have the paint around the edges, I just keep going. I keep dabbing and stamping until, as you can see, my brush is starting to run out of paint. That's okay, that's a good thing. That's what I want to happen, so it will look like that paint will fade away. So I shouldn't need to go back and get more paint until I'm ready for my second print. Once I'm finished, I carefully lift up my stencil, and as you can see, that's a pretty good job. There are just a few places where the paint bled around the edge of the stencil, but that's okay because it's really hard to get it perfect. So I have room to do another. I can place my stencil down and try again. It's okay if your two stencil prints end up overlapping. That's not a problem. So I'm going to hold my stencil down, get just a tiny bit of paint on my brush, not a lot, and then again, I'm going to be very careful this time. Let's see if I can just get a little bit of paint around those edges. Straight up and down. Now I want to go back and make sure that I didn't miss any spots. So I go all the way around my stencil. Have to be really careful not to move it. Holding it down. And then once I've gone all the way around, I just keep stamping Oh, there's a little spot I missed. Don't want to miss any spots. And now I'm just going to keep stamping, keep dabbing with that brush until it starts to run out of paint. So I'm not painting over and over in the same area. As I continue working, I'm going to start to move out into the negative space. And as you can see again, that paint is starting to run out, which is okay. That's what we want. And that's what makes it look like it fades away or gets lighter and lighter and lighter as it moves into the negative space. When I'm all finished, I can just set my brush down on my newspaper, lift my stencil up, and there we go. As you can see, this one's a little better, not quite so much bleeding under the edge. I also want to work to try to make sure I get about the same amount of paint on both stencils. I hope you have a wonderful week. I can't wait to see the prints that you create. And until next time, keep on creating.